Alexander the Great conquered the known world by age 30. He died at 32, and his empire collapsed within a year. That's not a tragedy. That's a business model, and Silicon Valley still uses it today. Here's what doesn't make sense. Alexander built the fastest-growing empire in history. He never lost a battle. He controlled more territory than any human before him. But the moment he died, the entire system fell apart. So either he was a terrible leader, or he was running a completely different kind of organization than we think. By the end of this video, you'll understand why Alexander's empire wasn't designed to last, and why designing it that way may have been his smartest decision. Let's rewind. It's 336 BC. Alexander's father, Philip II, is assassinated. Alexander inherits the throne of Macedon, a small militarized kingdom on the edge of Greece. He's 20 years old. Within 2 years, he's marching east with 40,000 men. Within 10, he's in India. The question isn't how he expanded so fast. The question is why he had to. Because here's the thing. Alexander wasn't running a kingdom. He was running a startup. And like every startup, it had one rule: grow or die. Macedon didn't have a functioning tax system. It didn't have infrastructure. It didn't have a bureaucracy. What it did have was an army. And that army was expensive. You'd think an empire grows because it's stable, but Alexander's empire grew because it was unstable. He couldn't afford to stop. Every new conquest funded the next one. Loot paid salaries. Tribute covered logistics. The expansion was the business model. So Alexander wasn't empire building. He was fundraising. And every battle was a pitch round. This is why he moved so fast. Stop moving and the system collapses. The soldiers expect payment. The generals expect land. The allies expect protection. You can't say we're consolidating. There's no consolidation budget. And this is where it gets counterintuitive. The more Alexander won, the more fragile he became. Here's why. Every time he conquered a new territory, he had to integrate it into his coalition. That meant keeping local elites happy, appointing Persian governors, marrying into their families, and adopting their customs. And his Macedonian generals hated this, because from their perspective, they'd just risked their lives to conquer Persia, and now Alexander was dressing like a Persian king. He was bowing to Persian nobles. He was speaking Persian at court. You'd think conquest unifies an empire, but Alexander's conquests divided his leadership team. The faster he expanded, the less his inner circle trusted him. And this wasn't a personality conflict. It was a structural problem, because Alexander was trying to run two incompatible systems at the same time. One system said, "We're Macedonians, we conquer, we dominate." The other system said, "We're building a multi-ethnic coalition. Everyone gets a seat at the table." And this is the mistake people keep repeating. The tension between those two systems is what eventually killed him. By 326 BC, Alexander's been campaigning for 10 years. He's reached the Indus River. His army is exhausted. His officers are questioning his decisions. His soldiers mutiny. They refuse to go further. So Alexander turns back. And this is the moment where the empire should have stabilized. This is where he should have stopped expanding and started governing. This is where he should have built institutions. But he didn't. Because he couldn't. Here's what most people miss. Alexander didn't have a succession plan. He didn't have a legal framework. He didn't have a tax system that could function without conquest. He had a coalition of warlords held together by personal loyalty and the promise of future loot. You'd think an empire this large would have infrastructure, but Alexander's empire had almost none. There was no central bureaucracy, no standardized currency, no legal code. Just Alexander, a network of personal relationships, and an army that expected to keep moving. By the time Alexander turned back, the empire wasn't expanding anymore, and without expansion, it didn't know how to exist. And when Alexander died in 323 BC, at 32, in Babylon, possibly poisoned, there was no one to replace him. not because there weren't capable people, but because the system was designed around one person. This is why his generals turned on each other immediately. There was no institution to inherit. There was no empire to run. There was just a coalition that had been held together by momentum, and the momentum had stopped. So here's the reframe. Alexander the Great didn't fail to build a lasting empire. He built something more dangerous, a system that worked perfectly until it didn't need him anymore. And if you look at it that way, his empire wasn't a failure. It was a successful exit. Within a year of Alexander's death, his generals carved up the empire. Ptolemy took Egypt, Seleucus took Persia, Antigonus took Anatolia. They didn't destroy the empire, they forked it. And those successor states, the Hellenistic kingdoms, lasted for centuries. You'd think the collapse of Alexander's empire was chaos, but it was actually a structured breakup. Each general took the piece they could govern. They built institutions, they created tax systems, they established dynasties. So Alexander didn't build a sustainable empire, he built a platform. And when he died, the platform forked into independent networks that each optimized for local conditions. This is why it happened so quickly. The system wasn't designed to survive him, it was designed to fragment. And it did exactly that, cleanly, predictably, and without destroying the underlying value. So what does this tell us? It tells us that expansion and stability are often incompatible. You can build a system optimized for growth, or you can build a system optimized for endurance, but you can't usually build both at the same time. This pattern repeats constantly. WeWork expanded into 800 locations in 6 years, growth without governance. It collapsed within 2. Uber expanded into 60 countries before figuring out profitability. It's still not profitable in most of them. The difference between Alexander and these companies? Alexander's generals actually captured value when the system forked. Most startups don't. Alexander spent 10 years fundraising through conquest. And when the pitch rounds ended, his investors, his generals, took their equity and walked away. And the uncomfortable truth is, many modern organizations are still building Alexandrian systems without realizing it. So maybe the real lesson isn't that Alexander failed. Maybe it's that we've been measuring success wrong. Because if your goal is to grow fast, conquer markets, and create long-term value for stakeholders, even if the original entity doesn't survive, then Alexander the Great might be the most successful empire builder in history. The question is, do we call that an empire, or do we call it something else?